What if you could live in Hamilton, work in Auckland, and meet up with friends for dinner in Tauranga, all without ever getting stuck in traffic? Today, we're diving into a detailed blueprint that could actually make that a reality. Think of this as a briefing on a proven model from Japan that could totally reshape New Zealand's future.
Okay, let's get right into it. We're talking about connecting New Zealand's economic powerhouse, the Golden Triangle between Auckland, Hamilton, and Tauranga. Now, the solution on the table isn't some abstract theory. It's a very specific, proven strategy called the Fukuoka Blueprint. And it's all about shifting from our current model of tax-heavy subsidies to a system that actually pays for itself.
And this slide, right here, it perfectly captures the choice we're facing. On the left, you've got our current reality, sprawl. Planners call this carpet development, and it's that inefficient, higgledy-piggledy mess that just creates traffic and actually costs our economy. But on the right, that's the future, articulated density. It's all about building smart, concentrated hubs of housing and shops exactly where they make sense, right around major transit stations.
So, here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the big infrastructure challenge New Zealand is up against. Then, we'll dig into the Fukuoka Blueprint itself. After that, we'll explore its really unique self-funding model, see how that changes the way our cities can grow, and finally, lay out a step-by-step roadmap before we get to the final big question.
You know, the core of the problem in New Zealand is this fundamental mismatch. We have this habit of applying short-term thinking to incredibly long-term needs. We're planning these massive, expensive projects based on the next election cycle instead of, for the next 100 years.
And this is what's really interesting. When you frame it like this, the value becomes crystal clear. Highways, they're basically 50-year assets that need constant, expensive maintenance. The kind of rail network we're talking about here is a 100-year asset. Just thinking about that one fact completely changes the conversation from a short-term cost to a long-term, multi-generational investment.
And that short-term thinking we talked about, well, it's led us directly to this, carpet development. It's that inefficient sprawl we saw a minute ago. It's when we just scatter low-rise housing everywhere with no thought to transit, which puts a huge strain on our roads, our environment, and ultimately our wallets.
So, if that's the problem, then what's the solution? This brings us to the Fukuoka Blueprint. It's a model that's not just proven to work, but, and this is the most important part, it's actually achievable for a country the size of New Zealand.
Now, when I say Japan, you're probably picturing the massive scale of Tokyo, right? But here's the thing. Trying to copy a megacity of 37 million people would be a colossal mistake. The real practical blueprint comes from Auckland's own sister city, Fukuoka. It is the perfect scale for us, a realistic and incredibly successful model that makes total sense for a city that's on track to hit 2.4 million people.
Okay, but the big question is always, how do you pay for it? And this is where the Japanese model just completely flips the script on how we fund public transport. It's all about making money beyond just selling tickets.
This balancing scale really says it all, doesn't it? The Western model on the left is shaky, relying almost entirely on fares and a ton of taxpayer subsidies. But the Japanese model? It's a balanced, integrated ecosystem. The key insight here is that in Japan, transport operators are also diversified businesses. They don't need government handouts because they create commercial synergy between their retail, their real estate, and their rail fares.
And here's exactly how that symbiotic engine works. First, the operator builds high-density apartments and offices right around the station, creating a built-in audience of commuters. Those commuters then become shoppers at all the little retail shops inside the station. This generates revenue that has nothing to do with fares, which then gets poured directly back into the rail system. It's a powerful, self-sustaining loop.
And here's the real game changer for any decision makers listening. This model makes a public-private partnership possible. The government provides the access and regulations, while an expert private company designs, builds, and runs the whole thing. And because the operator makes its money from the real estate and retail, they take on the financial risk. That means the vast majority of the debt stays off the public books.
But this is about so much more than just a clever way to pay for a train line. It's a blueprint for building better cities. It gets right to the heart of Auckland's biggest challenges: housing affordability and managing urban growth.
And what this does is it solves a massive flaw in our current system, something economists call the rentier trap. See, right now, when we, the public, pay for a new rail line, it's the private landowners nearby who get rich as their property values shoot through the roof. The transit-oriented development, or TOD solution, fixes that. The operator owns the land, so they capture that value uplift.
This ensures the value created by the transit actually goes back to funding the transit.
This model turns stations from just places you pass through into actual destinations. We get away from boring old transport services and create these integrated lifestyle hubs. With all the micro-retailing and smart vending machines, you create this morning-to-night vibrancy. It smooths out the passenger rush hours and turns a daily commute into a much better experience.
Okay, so how do we get from a great idea to something real? Well, the good news is this isn't just a pipe dream. There's a clear, practical, and phased roadmap to make this happen right here in New Zealand.
The rollout is designed to be a gradual evolution, not an overnight shock to the system. Stage 1 gets a baseline service up and running at 80 kilometers per hour. Stage 2 upgrades the network to hit 120, and finally Stage 3 brings in modern tilt trains to get us to that full operational speed of 160 kilometers an hour.
All right, let's just bust a big technical myth right now. A lot of people assume we'd have to build entirely new tracks from scratch. But that's just not true. The crucial point here is that New Zealand's network shares the exact same 1,067mm narrow gauge as Japan's standard intercity lines. We don't need to rebuild everything, we just need to optimize what we already have.
So what's the price tag? About $3.7 billion. Now, I know that sounds like a lot, but let's put it in perspective. That's the same cost as just 2.5 major highway projects. And for that price, we get an asset that will serve the country for twice as long.
And who is this all for? Well, the audience is already here, and it's growing. Projections show Auckland's population of Asian descent is heading towards 30%. Plus, you have a whole generation that really values convenience. There is massive, untapped demand for exactly this kind of transit. We're not building it for a future audience, we're serving the one we have right now.
So, when you put all of that together, it leaves us with one final, crucial question. It's really about weighing the strategic benefits of this investment against the very real cost of doing nothing.
So let's quickly recap those benefits. A self-funding financial model that stays off the public books. A high-speed connection that eases congestion. A way to accelerate housing supply and stabilize rents, and a 100-year asset that boosts the entire region's productivity.
So, with the proven self-funding model that tackles our biggest challenges in infrastructure, housing, and growth, all for the price of a couple of highways, the question isn't really whether we can afford to build a smarter future for New Zealand. The real question is, can we afford not to?